Version control is a way for us to keep track of changes to files over time. We're going to be using version control in this course to keep track of the work that we're doing throughout the term. More likely in your future, if you're in computer science, you're going to be using version control to help you, one, keep track of your source code, so the programs that you're making and the work that you're doing in your classes. But also, as you get further into computer science, you're going to be using version control to help you work together with a team. For us, for now, we're just going to be using version control to keep track of some of the stuff that we're doing, but longer term, you'll be able to use this with other people. We're going to be using something called GitLab to help us with this. GitLab is a web application. It's a website that we can go to. And at the University of Manitoba in the computer science department, we have a special version of GitLab. And you can find that at code.cs.umanitoba.ca. GitLab is functionally identical to GitHub. They do the same thing. They have a lot of the same features. They look different, but in terms of the way that we're using it, the terminology that we're using, and the kinds of ways that we're going to interact with it on the command line, they're functionally the same. Anything that you do with GitLab, you're going to be able to do with GitHub. The very first thing that we want to do after you've signed up for an account in whatever thing that you're using, so if you're using GitHub or GitLab, you can follow along with this approximately. After you've signed up for the service, you're going to have to make something called a new project or a new repository. I'm going to be using the word repository and project kind of interchangeably. They both mean basically the same thing to me. Really technically, when we're thinking about version control, we should be using the word repository, but project and repository to me are synonyms at this point. They mean the same thing. Once you're logged into GitLab, you can click on this new project button, or if you're on your dashboard, it probably looks a little bit more sparse than mine. There's probably a great big button that says create a project. I'm going to click on this new project button, and then it's going to give me a few different options. We can use either import a project, or we can create from a template, or we're going to create a blank project. I want to make a blank project because I'm going to be using this for stuff that I want to do on my own things. I want to fill this stuff up. I want to fill this project or this repository up with my own stuff. So I'm going to click on create a blank project. As you get to this screen, you're going to have an option to make a project's name. You can keep a lot of things in version control. You kind of have a lot of choices about what you're going to put into a project, a repository in version control. In the same way that you did when you were organizing your files, you kind of have to make a decision about what kinds of things that you want to put into a repository or a project. Sometimes this might mean things like an entire course worth of material. Sometimes it may mean things like an individual assignment for a single course. I'm going to give you some advice. My recommendation for now is that you create one repository or one project per course that you're doing. So if you're doing Comp 1002 right now, I'd recommend that you make a Comp 1002 project. And that's what I'm going to call this, Comp-1002. In terms of project URL, you are going to have no options here, and that's okay. Your option here is going to be whatever your username is for GitLab. Mine is fbristow, so I'm going to just choose fbristow here. This whole thing is going to be the address of the project or repository, and this is going to be important when we get to the point of trying to get this down into the command line to be able to use. When you're making a project on GitLab, on this version of GitLab, you only have one option here, and it's private. You don't get to pick which one you want. On GitHub, you have the option to make public or private repositories. If you're putting your schoolwork in a repository, I would suggest that you keep it private, just to making sure that nobody else is able to see any of the work that you're doing as part of your coursework. The very last thing I'm going to do here is uncheck this initialize repository with a README. You can leave it checked. It's fine if you want to, but I want to be able to make my own README later, so I'm going to take this off. This other option here, enable static application security testing, is way outside the scope of this course, so I'm just going to leave it unchecked, and then I'm going to click on Create Project. Once I've done this, I have a project. I have a repository, and what I can see right now on the GitLab webpage is it's giving me many different instructions about how to work with this repository. We're going to do these things, but I first want to start by taking a look at my command line. So I'm going to switch over to my terminal again. And in my terminal, I want to take everything that's here, which is kind of not really anything right now. It's just completely empty. And I want to get a copy of it in my my local terminal. I want to get a copy of this on my computer right now. So I'm going to change directory to my user directory. I'm going to type cd and just press enter. Remember, this is a shortcut to get back to my user directory. And then I'm going to hit Control L to clear my screen. I'll type ls. I have a folder called comp1002. What I'm going to do for now is I'm going to change the name of this from comp1002, so CO tab, to old comp1002. I've got this repository, this project in GitLab in my web browser. I want to clone this. So I want to make a copy of this on my local terminal. I've got two options here. I can use the address bar on my browser here, or I can click on this clone and I can code and I can click on this copy URL button. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go back to my terminal and I'm going to start typing in a command. The command that we use to interact with Git as a version control tool is to say Git, that's the name of the program, and then Git takes subcommands. So the second thing that we give to Git is the subcommand that we want it to run. The subcommand that I want to run is called clone. I want to copy the repository that's in this remote place to my local machine. It's empty. There's nothing there, but I still want to be able to get all of that stuff onto my local folder. I'm going to paste now. So I copied the URL from that blue button, and it ends with .git. If you just copy the address of the web browser, it's going to go up to the dot here and not finish off with the .git, but they both mean the same thing. They both mean the same thing. I'm going to press enter on my keyboard, and it's going to ask me for a username and a password. So I'm going to type in my username and my password. My username is fbristow. You can probably use your myumanitoba.ca email address as part of your username. And your password is whatever you use to sign up for GitLab. This is not the same as your aviary password, and it's not the same as your email address password. Once you've done that, it will give you a warning. You appear to have cloned an empty repository, and that's true. We did just clone an empty repository. And if I type ls here, now I've got this new folder that's called comp1002. I'm going to change into that directory. So cd and then co and then pressing tab. I'm going to type in ls here. There's nothing. This is an empty repository. There's actually something in here. I'm going to type in ls, and I'm going to type in -a and l. So A stands for list all, and I want to have long output here. When I do this, there's actually three things that are in this directory. One is a directory that's called dot. That's this directory. So the directory that we're in has a reference to itself in the form of this special symbol called dot. There's also this dot. We've been using that to navigate to the parent directory, to go up one directory. This is actually listed as a directory in the file or in the folder that we're in. The third thing that's here is a special directory that's called .git. Any file or folder that starts with a period on the command line is hidden when you type ls. So when I type ls, nothing shows up because the only things that are in here are things that start with a period. Back to version control. Version control and Git don't actually know anything about the files that we add to our project. Me and you, have to tell Git what files to keep track of. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start making a new file, and I'm going to start making a new file with Vim. I'm going to say vim readme.md. So I'm going to make a markdown file. It's called uppercase readme, and then with .md as its extension. Here, I'm going to just type in some stuff. So this is my comp 1002. I like to put underlines like this for my headers. I'm going to say this is all my stuff for comp 1002, period. I'm going to escape into normal mode, write, and quit from Vim. Now that I've got a new file in here, I'm going to type in a new command. My new command is going to be git, so it's the same program that we were using before, but I'm going to run git status. Status is the subcommand that I want to add. This tells us that we are on branch main. We'll look at branches in the next topic. There are no commits. Git keeps track of things that are called commits, and commits are really just changes to a file over time. It says there's untracked files, and these are files that are in the directory that we're in right now, but that Git doesn't know anything about, and it's not currently keeping track of. To add this, or to tell Git that we want it to keep track of it, we have to do something called staging the commit, and that means adding it to Git's folder, to a place that Git knows about it. So just like this command says, I'm going to run git add, and I'm going to run re and then tab readme.md. There are other options here. I could also say git add period, and that will add everything that's in the current directory. Remember that dot is just the current directory, but I'm going to add readme.md. If I type in git status one more time, now it says on branch main, no commits, changes to be committed. That this is green and that it's changes to be committed means that it's staged. If we accidentally added this file or accidentally added this change, we can ask it to unstage it by running this command. So git rm -- cached and then the name of the file. I did that on purpose, so I don't want to do that. Once I've added something to be staged to Git, I have to commit it to my repository. So I have to tell Git, I want you to keep track of this state that my file is in right now. If you are doing this for the first time, you might actually need to run a couple of commands before you're able to run git commit. So I'm going to run those commands right now. The first one is that you got to tell Git who you are. So I'm going to run git config, and I'm going to say -- local user.name. I'm going to type in my name here. This is something that you need to do one time, the very first time that you're doing commits in a folder, and then you don't have to do this again. I'm going to press enter here, and I'm going to say git config -- local user.email. The email address that I've used to sign up for GitLab is fbristow@cs.umanitoba.ca. You should put your @myumanitoba email address, or whatever email address you use to sign up for GitLab or GitHub. Once I've done that, now I'm able to make a commit. So if I do git status one more time, I can see that this thing is ready to be committed. It's staged. I can say git commit, and then I have to give it a message. The message is something that's a human readable message to say, this is what I did right now. So this can be things like I fixed this bug, or I added this new feature, or I made changes to the data set that look like this. Since this is our first commit, I'm going to say my commit message is first commit. I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard. There's some stuff here that is not super important for us to see. There's main. This is that on branch thing. We'll talk about branches later. There's the message that we gave. There's this string here, which consists of letters and numbers. This is a hexadecimal string, a sequence of numbers and letters that we can use to identify this commit. And then it tells us a little bit about the file that we added. Once we've added this file, we can run git status one last time and see that there's nothing to commit. The working tree is clean. That means that we haven't made any changes since the last commit that we did. Adding those files and being able to commit them is good, but the real utility of something like version control is that we can very quickly get back to what we were at before. So I'm going to type in a new command here that's called cat. Cat is a program that will let us print out the contents of files to the command line. So I've typed in RE and then pressed tab on my keyboard. Cat says, this is what this file contains right now. I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to delete the first line. So I did DD on my keyboard to delete the first line. And then I'm going to quit Vim, so write and quit. I'm going to do git status one more time here, and git status tells me that the changes have been made already. I've done something that has made this file different than it was the last time that Git has a commit for this file. I can get back the version of the file that I had before by running git restore. I made a mistake here. I don't want to add it. So if I type in cat readme one more time, we can see that I've made that change. Then if I do git restore, RE tab, and I do cat one more time, that line that I deleted has come back. Restoring or reverting changes quickly is something that we really like to be able to do with version control. Version control will also kind of blindly just track everything if you let it. And when we're working with things like source code, or we're working with plain text and we want to convert things into other formats, we only really care about keeping track of the original file that's used to generate all those things. So with Java, before I learned something new today, we were creating these .class files. With Pandoc, we've been making PDF and docx files from a markdown file. I don't really want my version control system to keep track of those files. So what I need to do is to tell my version control tool that it should not keep track of these files. So first, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say pandoc re tab. I'm going to say -o, and I'm going to make this a docx file. So I'm going to convert this into a docx file. And if I run ls here and I run git status, there's this readme.docx file that shows up, but I don't want to keep track of that file. I need to tell Git to not keep track of that file in a special file that's called gitignore. So I'm going to edit, so vim.gitignore. So this starts with a period, and then it's gitignore, all one word. I'm going to hit enter here. The things that we can put into this are very specific names. So on one line, I can write readme.docx. I can also do things like use something called a wildcard. I can say star.docx. Any files that start with anything and end with .docx should be ignored by this. I can also ignore specific directories. So if I have something that's called output, I can say ignore this entire directory. Anything that's beneath it should never be added to my version control repository. I'm going to delete output, and I'm also going to delete readme.docx. This star.docx covers that. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to save this file, write it, and then quit. If I type in git status this time, Git is going to say, oh, there's a new file here that's called .gitignore, but it doesn't tell me that that readme.docx is there. And that's great, because I don't want to commit that to my repository. I have to tell Git to keep track of this gitignore file, though. That is part of the project or the repository that I have. So I'm going to say git add, and then all files this time. So git add dot. I'm going to commit this. So each time I add a file, I'm going to have to commit it. And then I have to push it, git push. So I'm going to push this up to my remote repository. This is asking me for a username and password. It's the same username and password that you used when you cloned. So I'm going to type in fbristow, and then it's asking me to enter my password. So I'm going to type in my password. And what this has done is it's taken everything that I've got in my folder right now. So if I type ls here, and I see that I've got readme.docx and readme.md, I'm going to go back to my repository here, my project in GitLab, and I'm going to hit refresh. And now there's files here. So I've got my README file, and GitLab does a great job of taking this markdown file and showing me this nice fancy formatted thing. One last thing that I want to show before I finish this is that we're able to actually go back in time in the commits that we have. So I'm going to take a look at a new subcommand called git log. Git log will keep track of, it tells you about all the commits that have been made to a repository. If I want to go back to this commit, to my first commit before I added git ignore, I can do this. I can say git checkout, and then I'm going to copy this whole thing. I don't have to copy the whole thing. I could copy the first 7 or 8 characters, but I'm just going to copy the whole thing. And then I'm going to press enter. Git is giving us a bunch of information here about how we're in a detached head state. That's not important. But what is important is if I type ls here and I type ls-al, we can see that that .gitignore file is gone. If I'm in a state where I've made a commit and I do want to be able to see things that I've done in the past, I can use git log and then git checkout to be able to show me those things that I've done in the past. I kind of want to get back to where I was before though, so I'm going to do git checkout one last time. And what I'm going to check out now is main. Git checkout main. Remember, we've seen this a couple times. Branch is main. Main is the name of the branch that we're on by default. And again, we'll talk about branches later, but it is a quick way to get us back to the current state of things. Version control is a big thing. It's a really big thing in terms of there's lots of stuff to think about and lots of stuff to be able to do. We'll talk more about version control as we go further in the course.